All right, what do you think, friends? Shall we get started? All right, I'm getting the yes from the Deloitte team. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar on strategic collaborations. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Frances Misano, and I'm the CEO of New Schools Venture Fund. And I'm joined by my colleague, Natalie Wilson, who's helping to lead on our strategic collaborations effort here at New Schools. As you all know, this is a moment of significant change in education and in our society more broadly. And over the last year, we've been spending a lot of time listening to our venture community and partners across the field. And what we keep hearing is, yes, there are real challenges right now, but also real opportunity. We continue to see extraordinary education leaders, so people who are deeply committed to their missions, like all of you, thinking creatively about how to expand their impact even in this more challenging environment. At the same time, many leaders are asking hard questions about sustainability, growth, and how to move their work forward in a way that's both effective and durable. And so that's why we here at New Schools wanted to focus more intentionally on strategic collaboration. Not because collaboration is always the answer, but because when it's done well, it can be a powerful way to extend reach, strengthen organizations, and ultimately drive greater impact for the students and communities that we all serve. And we know that this work isn't new. Over the years, we've seen so many ventures in our portfolio and across the field collaborate from a position of strength. And we've taken a lot of inspiration and also learned a lot from all of those courageous leaders. And so what we've learned is that this work is complex, requires a clear strategic why, strong relationships, real-time capacity, and funding to explore it thoughtfully. And we know that there's no one-size-fits-all path. And so what we wanted to do is to take all those lessons learned to think about how we can support leaders like you as you're exploring a range of partnership options and as you make thoughtful, mission-aligned decisions about what's next for your future. So our goal is not to prescribe a solution, right? But rather to say, how might we support leaders like you on your journey for deeper impact? And so what that means is we're going to be providing a two-part webinar series with our partners at Deloitte to build a shared understanding of strategic collaboration. The interest survey that so many of you completed will help us to better understand the state of the field and also identify opportunities to connect leaders who are exploring similar paths. So today we're going to be talking about what strategic collaborations look like in practice. And I won't say more and take away the Deloitte team's thunder, but they'll share what's required to do this kind of work well. And if you find value in today's conversation, I hope you will join us for part 2 on April 9th, when we'll share lessons learned from the field. We're also going to be doing some deeper piloting work to provide deeper financial and technical assistance to a small cohort of our existing ventures who are interested in exploring strategic options further. So while we won't be able to support everyone right away, our goal is to learn from the work, to continue building resources, and to see how we can support the field in exploring this topic overall. Because at the end of the day, we believe that this is a moment for bold, mission-driven strategic choices, and we're really excited to learn alongside all of you. So I just want to say thank you to the Walton Family Foundation, the Charles and Helen Schwab Foundation, and to the Deloitte team for all of their support with this initiative. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo at Deloitte.
All right, thank you so much, Frances, and hello, everyone joining us today. As Frances mentioned, I'm Ricardo Roman, and I'll kick things off with some introductions and share a bit of what we're planning to discuss with you all today. So let me start by introducing myself. I've worked at Deloitte for the last 15 years, focusing on public and social sector strategy. Primarily in education and workforce development. And for the past 5 years or so, I've also headed Deloitte's engagement with a national high school nonprofit network. That's a little bit about me, but I'll kick it over to our team, starting with Joanna to introduce themselves. Joanna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Burleson. I lead the Monitor Institute by Deloitte, which is Deloitte's social strategy, social impact practice. I also co-lead our nonprofit M&A practice as well, and I'm based in Boston. Sarah?
Hi, all. Sarah Brayton. I'm a senior manager in our Monitor Institute practice. I started my career at Deloitte in our commercial M&A practice. and help lead our nonprofit M&A practice. I also have experience as a board chair living through my organization merging. So I'll pass it over to Alicia.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everybody. My name is Alicia DeMong. I'm a manager at the Monitor Institute. I've been at Deloitte for the last 7 years doing strategy and operations work with nonprofit organizations, focusing on M&A, growth strategy, and operational planning. And I'll pass it along to my colleague, Ajay.
Hi all, my name is Ajay Dayal. I'm a senior consultant here at the Monitor Institute. I've worked with public sector, private sector, and social sector organizations on their strategy and operations challenges over the last 5 years. Very much looking forward to discussing this topic with you all. I'll hand it over to our last team member, Rohan, to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohan. I'm an analyst here at Deloitte, and I have 2+ years of M&A experience based out of our Chicago office. Pleasure to meet everyone. And I will pass it back to Ricardo.
All right, thanks, team. And as Francis shared earlier, our team has been collaborating with NewSchools over the past several months to really plan and organize these webinar sessions. And more broadly, we've also been working with nonprofits on strategic collaborations and mergers for over 10 years. And I'm really excited to engage all of you today to share some of those insights and lessons learned during this session. And we could go to the next one. Yep. So in terms of how we'll spend the next hour together, we'll first go into a bit of context for what we're seeing in the landscape today related to strategic collaborations and provide a high-level overview of the case for collaborations in the nonprofit space. After that, we'll walk through the nonprofit strategic collaborations lifecycle to really ground ourselves on the different phases within the collaboration journey and also the key activities within that journey. You'll also have a chance to apply what we're learning through a quick diagnostic of your organization's level of readiness to pursue strategic collaborations. We want this to be a collaborative and interactive session as much as possible. So there'll be opportunities during the session to really engage in a few polls. And you should also feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, which should appear in your Zoom toolbar next to the chat and raise hand buttons. So we'll try to answer those questions as best as possible throughout the session, whether it's through our conversation during the session or in the Q&A function. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Joanna to provide some context on why this is an important moment to discuss nonprofit strategic collaborations. Joanna?
Thank you, Ricardo. And I'll jump right into it with a little bit of context setting. All of you on this webinar know that the nonprofit sector plays a critical role in the US economy and continues to grow, right? So we have over 2 million nonprofits in this country, accounting for about 5% of the economic activity in the country overall with respect to GDP. And we also know for much of the sector, historically, organizations have considered strategic collaborations, and in particular, mergers and acquisitions, often as a tool of last resort, particularly in moments of organizational distress, rather than what can be a powerful strategic lever to capitalize on growth. We would often see organizations merging that tended to do so because there was external pressure, such as financial distress, or leadership transition or succession, rather than as an intentional tool to scale and impact. Francis spoke about this moment in time for the sector. We have an incredible amount of macroeconomic uncertainty in the broader landscape, as well as for the social sector itself, experiencing significant resource constraints. And we have many organizations facing so much uncertainty. And we have leaders looking for opportunities to collaborate as a way to focus on resilience and growth for their organizations, as well as a tool that can provide a proactive path to sustain services, to expand reach, and to deepen impact for the future. And what we're seeing is more leaders are looking to not only pursue collaborations in the next 1 to 2 years, but also really focus on implementing deeper forms of collaboration. And we're going to talk about some of those today. I'd like to thank all of you who responded to our interest survey that we conducted leading up to this webinar. Many of you responded to that. And from that, what we found is about 70% of respondents said they were more interested in strategic collaborations today than they were a year ago. That's significant. Additionally, those organizations are interested in pursuing collaboration sooner rather than later. More than half said they were looking to do so within the next 6 months or so. What's really important here and worth noting is organizations are not just coming to this because of financial distress, but in fact, most are driven by things like a desire to deepen their impact, expand their offerings, and serve new communities. But we also asked about barriers to collaboration. And not surprising, there are lots of barriers when trying to pursue collaboration and mergers, including number one, finding the right partner. Second is getting that mission and vision alignment, as well as ultimately resource constraints. We know that this work takes not only money and resources, but also your time. And these all represent significant barriers to embarking on exploring deeper strategic collaborations. So because of that, our hope is by the time this session is over, you'll all be a bit more equipped with the tools and knowledge to start to overcome some of these barriers should you decide to pursue a strategic collaboration. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Alicia in a moment to talk more about the benefits of strategic collaboration. But before I do that, I just wanted to pause for a moment and sort of acknowledge the flip side of all of these benefits, which is to say, as a leader of an organization, a nonprofit, thinking about a deep strategic collaboration, including a merger or an acquisition, or perhaps sunsetting the organization, this brings up a lot of potentially conflicting feelings for leaders. Not only are we navigating a world of uncertainty and volatility, you're also thinking about your staff, your stakeholders. You might be a founder yourself and feeling the gravity of choosing the right path. We often compare, and we'll be doing this later, how M&A looks different between the private sector and the social sector. And at the end of the day, the private sector is focused on a return, and oftentimes, particularly acquisitions, can be a wonderful thing, and it's really the goal for so many organizations. In our world, in the social sector, if we're really driving towards long-term impact and sustainability, we cannot ignore the emotional and profound impact this can have on the individuals involved in the process. So I wanted to name that at the start here. And our goal with this session is to make sure you understand what your options are, make sure you feel equipped to choose the right path for the organization, and have some sense of what your next steps might be. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alicia.
Thank you, Joanna. So as we saw in the survey results, nonprofits may want to pursue strategic collaborations for a variety of reasons, with the two main levers being collaborating for growth and collaborating for continuity. Collaborations can be a valuable lever for growth in terms of expanding program offerings, expanding geographies served, perhaps serving more or different students and educators, and also expanding funding opportunities. Collaborations can also be used for moments of continuity, perhaps in moments of leadership transitions or a need for more financial sustainability, or even the need to consolidate back office functions. But the key here is not to wait for crises. It's really important to be proactive with strategic collaborations and really consider the full spectrum of potential reasons to pursue it, including not just for continuity, but for growth as well, and overall a greater impact for your beneficiaries and your community members. A survey by the Sustained Collaboration Network launched in 2024 indicated that 73% of nonprofits involved in collaborations achieved measurable success, including through expanded services, increased funding, and improved outcomes. A similar survey in 2021 from Sea Change Capital Partners found that 57% of nonprofits that underwent a merger specifically saw improvement in their financial sustainability. And through our experience advising nonprofits over the last 10 years, this trend has certainly continued. So keeping that in mind, we wanted to give a sense of what the potential value drivers can be when pursuing strategic collaboration. So when they're done well, strategic collaborations can have substantial benefits for nonprofits, whether organizations pursue them for growth, continuity, or both, like I just mentioned. They provide organizations with new ways to expand their impact, new ways to improve operational efficiency and do more with the same resources, improve fundraising, strengthen their value proposition with enhanced capabilities, reputation, and reach. And last but not least, an opportunity to also acquire expanded skill sets. So then what do we mean when we say strategic collaborations? I want to talk next about what the different types are. So on this slide, we show the different structures of collaborations that help organizations reach these value drivers that I just mentioned. Collaborations can range across the spectrum from a low to high level of effort, as well as a low to high level of actual integration and actual collaboration as indicated on the bottom axis. So today we'll focus our discussion on mergers and acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and shared services. These are some of the most intensive forms of collaboration that have the potential to deliver the highest impact and also reflect what we've heard is top of mind from you all as survey respondents. So when we talk about these collaborations, we're focusing on one-on-one forms of collaborations. So while multi-stakeholder coalitions or multi-stakeholder alliances can be really impactful in the sector, the life cycle that those types take on and the approach to those forms of collaboration look a bit different than the one-to-one forms that we'll be discussing today. One thing I'd like to acknowledge before we dive in is that each of these is one of the options as well is a strategic closure. So in the social sector, we've seen sunsets take a couple of different forms, one of which is if one organization decides to sunset operations, then its assets can be acquired or transferred to another entity or multiple other entities. In other cases, an organization may distribute its assets more broadly into the ecosystem, which typically involves collaborating with other organizations. So when we discuss sunsetting a bit later, we'll use a similar framework that we use when thinking about other types of collaborations. So with that, let's dive in. We'll start with shared services, probably the most straightforward of the options here. Let's start first with how we're defining shared services, which is that shared services is a type of collaboration which enables multiple nonprofits to share operational infrastructure, and commonly is how organizations streamline back office functions like finance, HR, and IT. Shared services is unique from the other collaboration structures we'll talk about because it may not involve collaborating with another similar nonprofit the way you would with a partnership or a merger. So a nonprofit can either contract with a managed service organization to outsource their back office functions, or an organization can also leverage a joint contracting model to jointly staff and manage back office staff across multiple organizations. Typically, nonprofits find that it is very time intensive to establish their own shared services organizations. So outsourcing to existing shared services organizations can be the most efficient and most cost-effective way to enter into this type of model. So when we talk about shared services today, we'll focus on option one, outsourcing to managed service organizations. So then moving along the spectrum of complexity and degree of collaboration, next is strategic partnerships. So strategic partnerships include a range of collaborations that vary in degree of complexity and structure, but also share some common characteristics that make them distinct from other collaboration structures. So strategic partnerships are characterized by a deep one-on-one long-term collaboration on areas that are core to an organization's mission. There's also a sub-spectrum of collaborations that we characterize as strategic partnerships. So starting from the top here, the most structured is joint ventures, which involve a legal agreement and joint board and joint entity. Then moving down to jointly run programs, those involve pooling resources to launch a new program or initiative. Then finally, strategic alliances, the least structured form that involves sharing staff or expertise, but also maintaining separate legal identities. All right. So now to talk more about M&A, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah, who's worked with many nonprofit organizations on M&A. Sarah, can you tell us a bit more about what that looks like for nonprofits?
Thanks, Alicia. Yes, so of the collaboration types we're discussing, M&A is the most intensive and long-lasting. I'll use the terms merger, acquisition, and M&A somewhat interchangeably, but they all refer to the combination of two legal entities into one, bringing together staff, programs, operations, governance structures, and finances to strengthen mission delivery. In the nonprofit space, this requires a transfer of assets from one entity to the other and dissolution of the acquired entity. There are 4 primary ways that acquisitions can take shape, depending on the difference in size between the two organizations and how different their business models are from each other. I'll start with the term merger. Using the term merger typically denotes two organizations of a similar size combining, this top row. While the mechanism is the same, one organization is acquiring the assets of the other organization, which then will dissolve. There are 2 common forms. So either one organization gets fully integrated into the other, resulting in a consolidation, essentially a larger version of the acquiring organization. This is more common if they have similar business models, or the 2 organizations come together in the form of a new business model that is transformative and brings the best of each capabilities to bear. For an organization that's acquiring a smaller company, there are 2 models as well. A tuck-in, where the assets would be absorbed and fully integrated into the organization that's acquiring the entity. Or on the right side, if you're looking at an organization that may have a different model, perhaps you're acquiring technology capabilities, for example. You might come together in a new combined organization, but still operate somewhat independently as 2 parts of a whole. This is called a bolt-on because you're coming together without fully integrating a business model. There may still be separate brands and separate operations. You may have heard of some of these structures in the corporate context and have an idea of what M&A looks like for companies. And while the ways that organizations merge in the corporate world and nonprofit world follow similar patterns, there are some very key differences in how to approach M&A for nonprofits. In the private sector, M&A is driven by maximizing shareholder value. This is supported by a financial model that quantifies cost and revenue synergies and demonstrates whether the deal will be accretive or dilutive to the share price. In nonprofits, the deal intent is usually centered around mission and impact. While the financial considerations are really important, usually the most important consideration is whether the combined entity can deepen, impact, and enable resilience together more than the 2 organizations can do by themselves. This is often a bit more of an art than a science. Additionally, as Joanna mentioned, to the motions related to mergers, this is another key difference that's worth noting. In the corporate space, mergers may be celebrated as a successful exit, and there may be significant financial benefits to employees. It may feel very celebratory. Sometimes in the social sector, these incentives don't exist, which further underscores the importance of really thoughtful stakeholder engagement and change management. Managing your stakeholders thoughtfully and building trust is especially important in a nonprofit merger. Understanding how and when to adequately engage the board, leadership, funders, staff, and beneficiaries is key to success. While perhaps not surprising to nonprofit leaders, thinking about these differences can be very critical when communicating with your board and other external stakeholders. I'm now going to transition and talk a little bit about the typical life cycle of strategic collaboration. While every collaboration journey is different, this is a visual on the next slide that we often use to illustrate the typical path and discuss phases, decisions, and governance milestones that shape the collaboration journey of the nonprofit sector. The first step is strategy. How a strategic collaboration fits with your organizational strategy needs to be clear upfront, whether you're the one proactively seeking the partner or deciding if the partner is the right fit for you. In this step, you interrogate both which form of collaboration is the best fit, as well as what an ideal partner would look like given your goals. The second step is diligence. Once a potential partner is identified, organizations move into preliminary conversations to explore alignment at the leadership and board level. Generally, diligence starts when both boards agree that the concept of a collaboration and merger would be beneficial, and they are willing to share information to assess whether your program, culture, strategy, and operations are compatible and surface any risks and red flags. The diligence findings inform a go, no-go decision, and if the decision is to move forward, leadership negotiates the terms of the collaboration and begins integration planning. The third and final step is integration and execution. Day one represents when your collaboration formally comes to life. In a merger, it marks the formal legal close and launch of the combined entity. But integration work that drives value typically continues well beyond that close date. So I'll go into a double click of each of these in a bit more detail, but before we go deeper, would love to hear from all of you. We're going to launch a polling question, which you should see pop up on your screen in just a second. And we want to know from you, where are you in the strategic collaboration life cycle? Are you interested? Just getting started? Are you further down the path? We'll give folks a minute to share their answers before we continue on. Okay, we'll give folks just another 10 seconds or so and then share the results we're seeing. And while we're waiting for the final few responses to come through, we did receive a question, which is, what does it look like for a nonprofit to acquire or partner with a for-profit? And we have seen lots of examples of nonprofits either partnering with or engaging in merger and acquisitions with a for-profit. There are some legal considerations of what that mechanism looks like, as well as considerations of whether you retain the for-profit structure. But it certainly is an option and has worked really well for some organizations in the past. Yes, Rohan, if you can display the results of the poll. Great. So it looks like we have a lot of folks today who are interested in learning and early in their journey, which is great. That's exactly what we hope to cover today. As well as a few folks who are further down the path of defining their strategy, a couple folks in due diligence, and a few that are integrating. So thank you for sharing where you are with us today. We'll go ahead and keep moving forward. And I'll start really diving deeper into strategy as the first step. This is really the most foundational step, and so we'll spend a little bit more time here and then go over due diligence and integration at a higher level. So if we move to the next slide, your strategy defines how you execute on your mission and theory of action as an organization. As part of this process, you've likely identified some strategic objectives. These may be growth objectives, perhaps expanding geographically or expanding your reach, or maybe more focused on continuity, adapting to some of the shifts that you're seeing in the sector. You then can, from your strategy, build a collaboration strategy, which helps you understand whether and how strategic collaborations can support your strategic objectives. With clarity on your strategic objectives, you can identify whether a collaboration makes sense and which type of collaboration may be the best fit. In a minute, I'll talk about a couple of frameworks that can help you explore the different collaboration options. But first, I'll answer the question that may come up is, when might you do this collaboration strategy? If your organization is open to strategic collaborations, we encourage you to either build this thinking proactively into your strategic planning cycle, or if you're off cycle, launch a focused effort to define your collaboration strategy before you actively engage in conversations with other organizations. Once your collaboration strategy is set, you then can move on to this third phase, which is setting core criteria for screening potential partners. Even if you're not actively looking for a partner, it's worth defining the criteria you use to evaluate one. That way you can respond quickly and confidently if an opportunity comes your way. So I'll now go into 2 frameworks that can help you identify which path might be best for you. So if your organization is really focused on some of the growth strategic objectives, perhaps expanding your reach in a period of forward momentum, there are 3 options that you can think about to expand your impact. You might choose to build. Build is when you develop the capabilities you need to grow internally using your own resources. You might choose to buy, meaning you would look to merge with another organization to grow with the help of their assets and reach. Or you could choose to borrow, meaning that you might pursue a strategic partnership or a shared service agreement to gain necessary capabilities. Questions that will help you decide which of these options make the most sense for your organization include what capabilities you need versus you have today, whether there are suitable partners available in the ecosystem, whether capital is available to invest in building capabilities yourself, and based on these considerations, you may choose one of the paths forward. Similarly, if you're focused on continuity, there is a similar set of paths available to you. Perhaps in this case, you're experiencing financial pressures and the landscape is shifting around you. We encourage you first to assess what assets you as an organization have, what the field needs, and what relationships you can lean on as you navigate options. Just like organizations focused on growth have build, buy, and borrow, organizations pursuing continuity may consider the options of switch, sell, or sunset. If you're looking for a path forward and see a new opportunity in what the field needs, you might choose switch or pivot your business model to capture new opportunities and configure differently. This could include a collaboration if your new business model lends itself to a type of collaboration, but it doesn't have to. Another option is to sell to an organization that can absorb your assets and take your work forward. This entails looking for another organization to acquire your organization and its assets and talent. And if neither of those paths are viable, you may find that sunsetting to sustain parts of your work across multiple organizations or the field more broadly is the right path forward. This could entail sharing learnings and IP more broadly with the field. So once you've selected your path, we move to the next slide. If you land on one of the collaboration options, buy, borrow, switch, or sell, your next step would be to identify and screen potential partners. This is where you can define a set of criteria and evaluate your options to see what partnership could drive the most impact. First step is developing evaluation criteria and framework. This is the most important to think about. What would you value in a potential partner? What are you trying to accomplish in your collaboration? Example criteria include mission fit, program alignment, financial health, etc. The next step is to reach into your networks and your funders' networks to source some potential partners and do some research on them. In this step, you can think expansively. As we had the question about for-profits, you may consider other nonprofits, for-profits, organizations, and adjacent spaces to your work. This is also a really good place as you're doing some research on potential partners to leverage AI. You can use annual reports, 990s, media coverage, and more to build profiles of your options. And after that, you can apply your screening criteria to those partners and begin to develop a short list of organizations that you may want to engage in exploratory conversations. As you can imagine, M&A will require more thorough research than strategic partnerships and shared services, but the basic steps will be the same across the collaboration types. Now that we've taken a look at strategy and the early stages of the collaboration journey, my colleague Ajay is going to take you through a tool that will help you reflect on your organization's readiness to pursue a strategic collaboration. After this assessment, I'll pick back up with more detail on the due diligence and integration phases. So over to you, Ajay.
Thanks, Sarah. So what I'm going to ask you all to do now is to scan the QR code that you're seeing on the screen. We'll also drop a link into the chat so that you can navigate to this. But this is going to be a quick 12-question survey that will help you evaluate your organization's readiness for strategic collaborations. At the end of the assessment, you're going to receive 2 scores, a strategic readiness score and a collaboration capacity score. And where you fall on each of those dimensions is going to give you a rough idea of where you are in your collaborations journey. So make sure to, jot down or keep track of that score, because in just a couple of minutes, we're going to show you how you can apply it and what those scores mean. So we'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to fill out that assessment. If anyone's having any trouble, you can try the link with the QR code. You can try the link that Rohan just dropped in the chat, and you'll get your scores shortly. While we're waiting for those answers to come in, there are a few questions that we have in chat. So Sarah, if I could bring you back, would love to get your thoughts on some of these questions that we're seeing. One of them that I'd like to highlight is at the very top. Laura asked us, do fiscal sponsors fall under managed service providers?
They can. So depending on what the fiscal sponsor is looking like, they may help with some of your back office functions. And so certainly that could be something that they offer. It really depends on the specific relationship that you have.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks, Sarah. Another one that I think is interesting is from Amber asking, she says, agreed that deepening mission is the goal in nonprofit M&A. However, how do we categorize financial sustainability versus deepening mission impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think financial sustainability is table stakes to impact, right? So we need to be able to sustainably exist as an organization to then achieve the impact we want to have in the world. So for some organizations, financial sustainability may be a more immediate need and consideration to enable that long-term impact. For an organization that's in this case, that's really the continuity piece we're talking about, where that's the most pressing issue, with impact being the ultimate goal.
And then one more that we've gotten, a couple of folks have asked it, but what are the options for a nonprofit and a for-profit that might be interested in collaborating?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this, but strategic partnerships are certainly an option. In the next webinar, we will actually highlight a few examples here of strategic partnerships. And there have been nonprofits who have acquired for-profits. So it is possible. I think the biggest consideration is whether the for-profit expects to be purchased, as it may be if it goes to private equity or to another buyer. That can be require a significant outlay of capital. We have seen cases where funders have supported that. And we've also seen cases where the for-profit entity was essentially donated to the nonprofit entity. And the main difference here is that it can be harder to dissolve the for-profit into the nonprofit. And so we've often seen structures where the for-profit remains as a subsidiary of the nonprofit, and there can actually be some real benefits to that structure.
Thanks, Sarah. I want to give folks a chance to kind of see what these scores might mean. So, Rohan, if you wouldn't mind taking us to the next slide. At the end of that assessment, like we mentioned, you should have received 2 scores in like the goodbye message that you see from the survey. So again, a strategic readiness score and a collaboration capacity score, and you can kind of plot those on the 2x2 that we have here. So just to walk you through kind of what each of these means, if you have a high strategic readiness score and a high collaboration capacity score, and those would be over 12 in each of those dimensions, you'd be in the upper right quadrant, meaning that you might already have the resources in place, the support in place that you need. You've thought through the strategy, and you're potentially ready to start sourcing and conducting due diligence on potential partners. If you have a high strategic readiness score, but a lower collaboration capacity score, meaning lower than 12, that puts you in that upper left quadrant where you should think about moving to execution. That might look like starting to socialize your strategy with your board and funders to, secure the support that you need to be able to move forward. If you have a high collaboration capacity score, but a lower strategic readiness score, that could indicate that you've moved quickly to line up the support and resources that you need, but you want to revisit those strategy pieces that Sarah was discussing earlier. So considering whether you are seeking growth or continuity and what collaboration path really makes sense for you. And if you've got lower scores in both of those areas and find yourself in the lower left quadrant, that doesn't mean that you're not in a good position to collaborate or that these aren't options for you. It just means that you're at the beginning, you're at the starting line where you're putting all of the pieces together that you need to thoughtfully carry out a strategic collaboration. So you'll want to think through those same strategic questions first that Sarah just talked through, and then gather those, other stakeholder support and resources that you need to continue.
Ajay, can I offer a reflection
Yeah.
also on the readiness grid here? I think
Please
a
do.
lot of organizations maybe find themselves in the bottom right because of opportunity, right? You might have a personal connection to another leader or organization, or a funder perhaps who's making a suggestion, or perhaps some matchmaking. And that's the reality, right? And so the guidance there is you don't need to walk away from the opportunity when it presents itself, but it's worth taking some time and a little bit of a step back to understand at the end of the day, what are we seeking to get out of this as an organization? Bring in some of that strategic thinking, strategic alignment. Consider all of the options so that way you feel much more confident to move forward with that opportunity, right, if it arises.
Thanks, Joanna. I think we can close the poll down. We can see the results from that. Okay, so it looks like a lot of folks are, as to be expected, given the response at the beginning, kind of at the starting line. But many of you are also ready to explore collaboration. So we've kind of covered both of the polls. Of those options. I think that the important thing to consider in all of that is that your strategic questions that you need to think about and aligning the collaboration pathways that are in front of you to your organization's broader strategy and goals is a really critical first step. So whether you're at the starting line or at any other pieces, in this spectrum, that's the first place to consider what you have, and as Joanna said, have all those pieces lined up regardless of the opportunities that are in front of you. So with that, Sarah, I'll hand it back to you to kind of bring us back to the life cycle and help us understand what the next phase looks like for organizations that have their strategies in place and have a starting point.
Great, thank you, Ajay. So bringing us back to our life cycle slide, the next major step is diligence. Due diligence is about testing the strategic, financial, cultural, and operational viability of a potential collaboration. So at this stage, both organizations' boards and leadership teams are engaged in analysis to confirm alignment, surface risks, and assess whether integration is achievable and worth pursuing. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see some of the core dimensions we recommend assessing as part of due diligence. starting with mission and impact alignment, capabilities, programs, products, positioning in the market, brand and reputation, and financial and legal considerations. You'll notice that culture and leadership is at the center of this visual because that's often what makes or breaks deals, even when everything else aligns on paper. So really important to go deeper in that area. On the right, we've outlined some of the questions that might guide your work. What are stakeholders saying? What's the value of a combination? What are the risks? Why do this now? And what are the next steps for implementation? M&A is the most structured due diligence process of the different collaboration structures we've discussed today, and it often makes sense to bring in a neutral third party that can objectively analyze the data on both sides. Other collaboration structures are less structured, but don't require you to go into quite as much depth on all of the dimensions, and so I'll just quickly flip through to show you some of the differences. For example, in strategic partnerships, you'll still be examining questions around organization cultures, programming, mission, and impact, with the goal of crafting a clearly defined partnership agreement that both sides are equally bought into. And then for shared services, you really here are thinking of this more as a procurement process, understanding the provider, what capabilities they bring, maybe questions around how they might scale as you grow, or how they'll integrate with your existing processes and systems. Good diligence balances hard data with a clear-eyed view of how the organizations work, lead, and show up in their communities and what the future could look like together. The goal isn't just to confirm what you hope to be true, but to surface the full picture through your analysis so the board and leadership can make an informed go, no go decision. That go, no go decision is the moment when you decide to move forward, pause, or walk away. And we'll take a closer look at some of the key decision points that show up depending on the type of collaboration you're pursuing. In M&A, at this point, relevant stakeholders, boards, leadership, others will have reviewed findings from the diligence report and weigh them against the original goals of the collaboration. The conversation should still center on whether the strategic rationale still holds, whether the risks are acceptable, and whether the organization has the capacity and resources to deliver on the integration. For M&A, the board will provide input on legal, governance, and brand implications. You should also define how the combined organization will be structured, your budget and the resources required, and how a merger would impact your stakeholders. If we go forward a slide for strategic partnerships that are involving close collaboration, there's often shared decision-making, shared resources that require many of the same considerations as mergers. However, partners are maintaining legal and operational independence, so legal structure and organizational design are usually not on the table for discussion in these forms of partnerships. And then lastly, for shared services, an outsourced shared service model does not involve blending of resources or operations, really minimizing some of the critical considerations to the impact on stakeholders and resources. So with that, I will go to our third and final step, integration and execution. Once the decision is made to move forward, the focus shifts to integration planning. This is where detailed preparation happens across all the work streams that will bring the collaboration to life. On the next slide, you'll see an illustrative list of the types of work streams you may need to plan around, from your updated strategy to programs, finance, HR, communication, technology. For M&A and more structured strategic partnerships, each work stream needs a clear owner, defined milestones, and a realistic timeline. Integration planning is about ensuring that when day one of a collaboration arrives, the most critical pieces are in place for the combined organization to function effectively and present a unified presence to staff, funders, and the community. Successful integration is less about the checklist and more about how leaders show up and bring people along with them. And so there are 4 key principles for successful integration that we've seen in our experience. So first, executive leadership involvement. When leaders are aligned and present, making timely decisions and modeling new ways of working, it sets the integration up for success. Second, communication and transparency. Establish a steady cadence early. What's changing, what isn't, and when. Use two-way channels so staff can ask questions and provide feedback. This reduces rumor mills and keeps attention on mission and service continuity. Third, stakeholder engagement. Make the process collaborative. Stand up cross-organization working groups and include staff where it makes sense. Bringing practitioners into the design increases buy-in and surfaces practical issues before day one. And lastly, emphasizing the shared vision and the benefits. Continue to re-articulate the why in play language. Who will better be served? What capabilities will improve? How will success be measured? When people can see the benefits for beneficiaries and their community, adoption rises. As a final reminder here, day one is the start, not the end. I talk about day one sometimes as the wedding. And as we all know, in a marriage, the hard work comes after that day. And so while it launches the combined entity, work around culture, processes, systems often takes 6 to 12 months to fully integrate. And keeping these success factors front in mind can help you sustain momentum. So we've covered a lot of ground today. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Alicia to close out with a few critical success factors across the life cycle. So Alicia, over to you.
All right, so some critical success factors across the phases. So if we start with strategy, first, it's really important to be clear on your guiding vision before exploring a collaboration. Too many organizations shortchange this step, but it's really critical to bring intention to the process to save you time and resources down the road. Secondly, consider non-traditional partners. The education space is highly diverse, and an open mind on partners can help you find the right partner. In terms of diligence, building trust among stakeholders early and assessing yourself and your capabilities as you begin to share with others is vital to the success of any collaboration. Also, make sure to take stock and assess assets and weaknesses with collaborators to help the parties understand where investments may be needed. And last but not least, integration looks very different depending on the type of collaboration, like Sarah just mentioned, but transparent and frequent communication and building intentional feedback loops help guide decision making and can help you be successful no matter what collaboration you choose. So before we close out, as you may know, this webinar is just one piece of a two-part webinar series that you can join to learn more about strategic collaborations and where we can address some of the questions that we may have not touched on today. So on our next slide, we show a bit more about a preview, essentially, of what you can expect for the next webinar on April 9th at 2 p.m. You can expect to learn more about due diligence and integration, as well as learning from a few of your peers that will be sharing their own real-world experiences with strategic collaborations in a panel. So highly encourage you all to register now using the QR code on the screen, as well as the link that you received in your email or the link in the chat. So before we close out, we do have some time for a couple of questions that were submitted. So Sarah, if I could bring you back, we have a question from Kathleen. How about collaborations both for a for-profit and a nonprofit in an education company? What can those look like?
Yes. So we have seen some. I will use an example I'm personally close to. Pivot Learning and Core. So Pivot Learning was a nonprofit in the professional services, professional learning space, acquired a for-profit of Core, which focused on the science of reading. And there actually were some really beneficial elements of that combination of both the for-profit and nonprofit structure that really helped the combined organization success. So there are some examples out there in the education space, particularly in kind of the professional learning space, where you're selling services and products. There can be some benefits of having that combined structure. Happy to elaborate more offline, but we have seen some good examples.
Thank you, Sarah. We have another question from Rachel. Are there any frameworks you can share to help choose the best opportunity if there are multiple partnerships on the table for M&A specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is really going back to that partner identification step and the partner criteria, being really clear on like what partnership would be ideal for you and what are you looking for in a partner can help narrow down the choices. To think about what could the combined entity look like, and therefore what is the possible success of that combined entity. So I would kind of go back to that criteria, and then also as you think about maybe early stages of due diligence, what is the combined value proposition of the two organizations coming together and comparing those across possible combinations.
Great. Another question related to for-profit. So is there a way a nonprofit can fold into a for-profit?
It's a good question. I'd assume there is possibly a way. I am not sure that I have seen an example of that. So a great question, and certainly welcome thoughts in the Q&A if anyone does have an example, but I'm not personally familiar with one.
We do have a question from Michael about organizational culture. So how do you manage institutional culture differences when working with a new partner?
Yes, so this is such a key question and will be a topic that we dive deeper into on the next webinar, which really is like the how to be successful in all of this. I think the most important thing going in is acknowledging where cultural differences exist. So there are cultural assessments that you can use. You can also do more informal kind of sliders and mapping how different organizations function. But I think going in clear-eyed about where are we similar, where are we different is really important. And then you can kind of think about where do we want to be as a combined entity? It's a pretty unique opportunity for a nonprofit to redefine your culture. You don't get to do that very often as an organization. And so the combination can actually be a choice point of where do we want to be moving forward. And then there's all sorts of strategies you can use around change management, modeling from the top with leadership, modeling different ways of working to help reinforce the culture that you want to implement. So as I mentioned, more to come on this front on the next webinar, but such a good question and certainly a key question to think about. So I know we're at time, but really appreciate all the questions. And if folks want to submit some more, we also will use these to inform some of the topics we talk about in the next webinar. So please join us for that one. And just thank you all for your engagement today on this topic.